A great idea can get you ahead of the game, but a visionary concept can be a game changer. I'm Albie Benitez, and this is Game Changer.
There are men and women driven by passion, committed to find happiness and meaning. They strive to better our lives and make us aspire to help others. They are visionaries. They advocate events, ideas, technological innovations that make significant shifts in our thinking. To make a better future for us, they pursue game-changing invention. Journey with us as we tell stories of these visionaries and their game changers.
This episode of Game Changer, with a 5.5 million housing backlog, is in-city resettlement, the game changer in mass housing. Butterfly homes, dome houses, container van homes, and even floating houses. And condo living, a trending lifestyle for a booming submarket. A roof over our heads. It is a basic human need. Sadly, countless Filipino families do not have a decent shelter. Think about it. 5.5 million Filipinos are in need of adequate homes, most of them in urban centers like Metro Manila. To do something about this huge backlog in housing, government and concerned groups decided to talk and discuss anything and everything under the sun about mass housing. Thus, the Housing Summit was launched. This is the Tolyahan River in Valenzuela City. Hundreds of families live along its banks. Every now and then, the river overflows, endangering the whole community. Nanay May Barrios is a longtime resident in Valenzuela City.
Yung napangasawa ko kasi 2004, dito na siya nakatira. Dito niya ako inuwi. Siyempre, dahil pag sinabi natin na nasa gilid ng ilog, medyo may kahirapan kasi may mga time na medyo minsan tumataas ang tubig, minsan umuulan doon sa ibang lugar, bumabagsak dito yung baha.
Her family has experienced the worst the weather and the river can offer.
Hindi namin malilimutan na naranasan namin dito yung undoy. Lahat ng gamit namin na naipundar, kasama po yun. Iilan lang sa gamit ang nadampot namin at sarili namin. Malakas yung bulusok ng tubig, kaya lahat yun, wash out yun.
For decades, government has struggled to provide safe and decent homes for families like that of Nanay May. Countless housing programs and projects had been put on the table by past administrations, but real and effective mass housing was still elusive. Home ownership is still a dream, not only for informal settlers, but also for middle-income earners. John Viston works as a full-time pastor. With his wife's income, they earn as much as 20,000 pesos a month. But they could only afford to rent a small apartment.
Gustong-gusto naming magkaroon ng bahay kaya nag-inquire kami sa pamamagitan ng Pag-ibig. Pero nung kinuwenta nila yung kailangan naming bayaran buwan-buwan, umaabot ng 9,000 mahigit. Mahihirapan kami magbayad, mahihirapan kami mag-budget ng pagkain namin. Pati yung mga baon ng mga bata, pati yung tuition fee.
The pastor's situation reflects part of the huge difficulties the country is facing in terms of shelter delivery. The government needs to build 5.5 million homes now, and the number would keep rising each year if not addressed effectively right here, right now.
Housing backlog. There are two basic sectors. No? First one would be the informal settlements, ISF families. They're basically 1.5 million backlog. About 580,000 is actually in Metro Manila that needs housing. So far as the formal sector is concerned, there's also a backlog.
The backlog had been identified, yet concerned agencies still failed to come up with the right solution. This begs the question, is there something wrong with the solution? The National Housing Summit, participated in by all stakeholders, came up with what it hopes would be a game changer. The House Committee on Housing and Urban Development and the Senate's Committee on Urban Planning, Housing and Resettlement initiated the Housing Summit.
The summit is a meeting of all the stakeholders involved in housing to talk about the problems of housing, the housing backlog, and to try to find a solution to these problems. It involves the private sector, the different developers, institutions in the private sector, the non-government organizations, people's organizations, as well as the government agencies involved in housing.
The Housing Summit focused on 4 themes: identifying land suitable for socialized housing, addressing gaps in existing housing financing schemes and encouraging public investment in the low-income housing sector, streamlining and incentivizing efforts of key public institutions involved in housing, and addressing shelter challenges in building inclusive cities. All these are summed up in one buzz phrase: in-city resettlement.
The sub-theme of the summit really is making in-city housing for informal settler families a reality. When we met and we discussed these issues with the different stakeholders, it is now the battle cry of the National Housing Summit. So the clamor of the summit is for in-city housing.
In particular, the agency in housing that would be basically the National Housing Authority and the Socialized Housing Finance Corporation. So these are the 2 agencies that produces as well as finance the construction of socialized housing projects that takes care of these communities.
The AMVACA or the Alyansa ng mga Mamamayan sa Valenzuela at Caloocan is a housing cooperative led by Enriqueta Catayong. It is the first in-city housing relocation that started through the initiative of the informal settler communities themselves, with a little help from other Housing Summit stakeholders.
Lahat po ay mga nakatira sa danger zone, sa tabing ilog at sa ilalim ng Napocor line. So ang criteria po, kami ang maghahanap ng lupa, kami lahat, ang mga tao, ang organisasyon po ang masusunod lahat. Ang loan po namin dito ay 450,000 per beneficiary, na yun po ang ibinili namin ng lupa at para sa site development, pati sa building construction.
For the members of the cooperative, poverty was not a hindrance in owning their dream community. The Housing Summit was an 8-month-long series of activities where there were discussions, sharing of information, and thorough analysis of available data. Policies were proposed, and interventions from both the public and the private sector were identified. The Housing Summit ends this April, but it hopes that the framework for a truly game-changing solution has now been laid down.
Ang Housing Summit po, malaking tulong din po sa amin kasi sila po yung nag-guide, sila yung nag-aayos doon sa mga gusto ng mga urban poor para mag-materialize ang People's Plan.
This is the first time that we're able to bring together this many stakeholders and discuss and sit down for this long a period of time, level off on what really the problems are. So definitely, the National Housing Summit is a game changer.
Of course, in-city or near-city resettlement is no magic bullet that would make all our problems disappear. It has to be aligned with an effective mass transportation system, and it has to have the cooperation of the LGUs, the private sector, and the communities themselves. Up next, butterfly homes, dome houses, container van homes, and even floating houses. Yup, necessity is the mother of invention.
Midas Hotel and Casino, a contemporary, design-led lifestyle hotel in the majestic hub of Manila with fabulous views of sunset on the bay. Midas offers designer amenities and guest rooms and suites, supreme restaurant options for sumptuous enjoyment, event studios for corporate meetings and vows, and a casino with world-class gaming. Here at Midas, we make days into moments. Sparkling creativity. It's stylemanship by Midas.